All of the homes on the FDS in Pot 18, including the 12 new homes previously mentioned, will continue to either meet or exceed the minimum requirements set out in the Residential Design Standards SPD and the Aylesbury Area Action Plan. Furthermore, there will be an increase in the number of dual aspect units compared to the approved schemes, and the new homes on the FDS in Pot 18 will be of an extremely high standard, providing large, well-lit, well-ventilated homes with high-quality private and communal amenity spaces. The most substantive changes to the two schemes relates to affordable housing, tenure mix, unit mix and home type. In terms of unit mix and housing type on the FDS, the proposed amendments remain entirely consistent with the original consent and would in fact increase the number of 4-bedroom units, which is welcomed as it would lead to an improved housing choice as a result of larger family-sized homes. I'd now like to come on to affordable housing and tenure mix. The table set out on the screen shows the approved and proposed housing split by tenure and habitable room for both the first development site and Pot 18. Now, as originally approved, the FDS in Pot 18 would cumulatively provide 952 homes, of which 462 would be affordable, which would equate to 51% affordable housing and 49% private housing on a habitable room basis. As proposed as part of the amendments, the FDS in Pot 18 would cumulatively provide 964 new homes. This would include 582 affordable homes and 490 private homes. This would equate to 60% affordable housing and 40% private housing. The proposed amendments would therefore deliver a 10% increase in affordable homes, which is 120 additional affordable homes compared to the approved scheme, and this would include additional social rented and intermediate homes. This is a very significant benefit of the amendments, as they would secure the early delivery of an increased level of affordable housing, which in turn would assist in the decant of both tenants and leaseholders from future phases of the Aylesbury regeneration, allowing them to continue to live in the area, as well as enabling the progression of the future phases of the regeneration scheme. Now, following consultation, 11 objections have been raised. Many of them were objections related to the original scheme, which has already been decided. Some objections were raised about the proposed amendments not actually being minor, the fact that some of the private flats would be reduced in size, that some windows would be getting smaller, that there was no justification for the gas pressure reduction station not being provided, and early delivery of Pot 18 and emergency escape. All of these objections have been addressed in full in paragraphs 94 to 103 of the committee report. In conclusion, the proposed elevational amendments of very minor nature would not result in any amenity impacts to surrounding occupiers and would continue to secure a high standard of design for the Aylesbury regeneration. The proposed amendments would result in 12 new homes, as well as a substantial increase in the number of affordable homes compared to the approved scheme, with 120 additional affordable homes being provided over and above those already secured as part of the original planning application. The provision of 60% affordable housing on the early phases of the Aylesbury regeneration alongside the previously approved social infrastructure, such as the health centre, library, extra care housing, specialist living accommodation for those with learning difficulties, over 55s housing and an early years facility is fully supported. As such, officers recommend that application 17 AP 3885, which refers to the FDS, be approved subject to referral to Mayor of London and the completion of a deed of variation to the Section 106 agreement, and that application 17 AP 3846, which relates to Pot 18, be approved subject to conditions.
Thank you. Members, right. Councillor Chair.
Thank you very much. I refer to point 44 and the cumulative impact on affordable housing, the table that you've produced. And I look at the column of the 4 bedrooms. So on the social rent, there is no material change, so it remains at 20. And for the private homes, there is an increase of 6 extra homes for 4-bedroom homes. I was just curious why that change happened for the private accommodation and not the social rented accommodation, particularly given that there are a number of large families in Southwark who would particularly need those those 4-bedroom homes.
It's just the choice of the applicant. 3 of those homes are the townhouses, which will be provided on the site where the gas pressure reduction station is going to be, and the other homes are part of the internal reconfiguration. In terms of affordable housing, there would still be 20 social rented 4-bedroom units, and in terms of compliance with the AAP, it would still meet all of those targets.
One follow-up. Has this got anything to do with viability? I know that you know that 3 of the town houses are going to be 4-bedroom homes, but has this got anything to do with viability at all, or not?
No, it's not got anything to do with viability as far as I'm aware. We've had a viability assessment, it's been assessed independently. It's also been reviewed by the GLA, and the scheme is considered to be providing beyond what would be considered the maximum reasonable amount of affordable housing. So in effect, it's not viable, so it wouldn't be affected by that.
Thank you.
Councillor Silks.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I welcome the increase in affordable homes, but I've noted that obviously there is a requirement that there should be an increase in childplay space. So I was really disappointed to see that there's actually been a reduction, and in the present climate where we're under sort of budgetary constraints in terms of youth provision, and with the increase in antisocial behaviour in our youth, I'm particularly concerned about the shortfall that currently exists with the revised scheme for the 5 to 11 age group. And given that these developments are supposed to be looking for or looking towards vision and provision, I'm really disappointed to see this. Could you sort of expand? It didn't specifically give a reason. One of the concerns were around the TfL Quiet Way, but could you actually elaborate on that, please?
The significant increase in the number of affordable homes has quite a large impact on the child yield. Affordable homes generate more child places than private accommodation. Previously on the consented scheme there was a shortfall in the 12+ age group, but within the land that exists on the first development site, the uplift for the 5 to 11 age group just couldn't be accommodated. It would have taken land that was assigned for so it wasn't able to be accommodated within the site, which is why we have taken a payment, or we are suggesting that we take a payment of £107,814 that can be spent on upgrading child play facilities within Burgess Park, which is very close to the site.
I don't think that's a particularly satisfactory answer and response. You know, when we're in terms of our long-term vision, trying to sort of reproduce cohesive communities and provide child space areas whereby our young people are able to sort of enjoy their amenity sort of close to home, as opposed to having to sort of travel, then I think that's unsatisfactory from a personal perspective.
Do you have a follow-up question?
I do. I'll let somebody else, but I do actually.
Do it now or?
No.
Okay, Councillor Whittle, thank you.
Well, just to follow up on the play space, the fact in paragraph 63 you say that the floor, the roof terraces have been removed. That would have provided some play space, and the narrow strip at the side garden at the southernmost of the dwellings has been removed to make a bin store. Well, you know, surely that would be better provided as a place to grow vegetables, for example.
The strip of land beside the house is about 1.5 metres wide. It wouldn't be big enough for a play space.
No, but it could be an amenity space, like a bit of garden.
What we need to remember is the FDS was always designed at the absolute maximum. It was always going to be a very dense development that had the highest proportion of houses for the size of the site. Going forward, there will be more open spaces throughout the rest of the outline scheme, including, I think, 3 new parks. But the first development site was always recognised as having to be a very dense development. But I mean, some of the changes to the amenity space are very, very minor. I take your point about it could be used for growing vegetables, but there also needs to be a place to store some of the bins, and it is a very small strip of land.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up and supplement on my previous question. Going on, progressing to paragraph 67, you said that the result in the reduction of child space will not have an impact on neighbouring amenities. Can you expand upon that? How are you able to sort of come to that conclusion? How are you able to draw that conclusion? Are you stating that therefore the young people at this particular plot would not be able to mobilise to other areas? What do you mean by that?
That is in reference to amenity impacts on adjacent occupiers, so like impacts on daylight and sunlight, impacts on privacy. It's not about play space.
Right. Well, it doesn't make it absolutely specific, does it? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCash.
So, thank you very much for the report. It was very, very helpful. So, you outlined a number of objections, and unless I misheard, I don't think you mentioned objection 99 regarding fire regulations. So, objection 99 refers to recommendation from the Royal Institute of British Architects that there should be 2 or more escape routes, and that's kind of response to Grenfell, and that was put into the Hackett Commission. What it doesn't say here, though, is that the Hackett Commission didn't actually adopt that recommendation, for which Royal Institute of British Architects were not happy. And our response says that we complied by building regulations, which obviously weren't adapted in the way that the RIBA wanted. So my question is, do we have any specific regulations that have changed? I know, obviously, I appreciate there was, we changed this quite a lot 10 years ago, but are we essentially, can you expand a little bit further on the response in 99 to reassure us that the things in place here are satisfactory in the case of a fire?
As I understand it, the buildings will be fitted with sprinklers, but the applicant is here, they'll be able to give you more detail on that. I mean, technically the issue around the building regulations is not really a planning issue. I understand how important it is, but the buildings are designed would comply with the building regulations in terms of fire safety and sprinklers and so on. The developer will be able to give you more information on that.
Fine, thank you.
I'll take, if I may, Councillor Moyes first, as she hasn't spoken, unusually. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, on the table in paragraph 44, where the accommodation has sort of shifted round, the different sizes and the different tenures have shifted round. So we've seen on the private ones a significant drop in the 1 and the 2 bedroom properties, and an increase in the 3 and 4 bedroom properties. Is that because we have an identified need for those properties for families in the private sector? Because my nervousness, I know there's nothing we can do in planning terms about this, but my nervousness always about that sort of property is that they will be buy to let, and that they will just be, they will go to individual, independent sharers rather than families.
It's just the developer's choice, really. The way the policy is worded is that they have to have a certain number of 1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, but it's not a requirement by tenure. So yeah, it's just the developer's choice.
If that's okay, because it's sort of a similar. It's again about this table actually, and about the sort of redistribution of unit sizes. I noticed that there's a abolition of any family sort of 3 or 4 bed intermediate properties within the tenure split, and there are now, albeit there's an increase in intermediate units overall, that all 1 and 2 beds. And I mean, there are, I'm sure, families out there who would benefit from a 3 or 4 bed intermediate tenure property. It seems surprising. Can you comment on that element of that change?
There is an uplift in social rented 3-bed units. The larger, yeah, no, I'm coming on to that. The shared ownership units, the larger ones, have always been difficult to sell. It doesn't seem to be that popular.
Now, if I may, I'm noting that questions that are now being coming forward are really questions that might be best put to the applicant. And I'm wondering if you would bear with me, if we hear from the applicant, we can always revert to the officers if need be later on. Would you mind if I do that? Agreed? If I could proceed on this, County Attorney, because it's something quite specific for officers, which is what, in that case, go ahead.
Thank you. So current policy requires 10% of our home, 10% of the new homes to be suitable for wheelchair users. And I note that in plot 18, there's going to be a reduction in one of the wheelchair users' parking, housing, I beg your pardon. And that therefore is under our policy, as it's 9.6%, of which is considered acceptable according to your report. I was just wondering, is there anything that can be done to address that, because it is in its current form not policy compliant?
But with 9.8% now, we've rounded that up to 10, but there's also an over-provision on the first development site, so cumulatively across the 2 sites they would be providing more than 10% wheelchair units. I mean, it's something the developer could probably provide under a unit, we would have to ask them, but my assessment of it was that it was compliant with the policy at 9.8% by rounding it up, then taking into account the over-provision on the FDS.
Thank you. Thank you. If I can ask the applicant or applicant agents, forgive me, the objectors to come forward. Here we go. Get it right. Is there an objector in the room? I struggled earlier on to identify someone. If there's not an objector, which is an interesting concept, we'll go straight. We'll go straight to the applicant or applicant agents. Thanks. Come forward. You can see why I struggled. Can I ask you could introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes once I get my technology working, but you can introduce yourself and I'll be ready by that time.
Good evening, Chair, good evening, Committee. I'm Eleanor Purst, I'm the Regeneration Director for Notting Hill Genesis, the applicant and the lead officer within Notting Hill Genesis, the Council's partner under the Development Partnership Agreement.
Good evening, Chair and Committee. My name is Sarah Hiscott. I'm the planning agent on behalf of Notting Hill Genesis.
Welcome. You can start now. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As summarised by Mr McLennan, our applications seek to refine the tenure mix in both the FDS and Plot 18 phases along a number of minor design amendments. But importantly for us and Notting Hill, the overall approach to the scheme remains true to the vision of a high-quality, tenure-blind approach with generous public open space. Now, you'll be aware that the long CPO process for the FDS has presented challenges for us, And it's also had an impact on the shared commitments we've made along with the Council's development partner to offer new homes to existing residents in line with our initial promise. To address this delay, we have started from a commitment to maintain the Council's requirement for affordable housing and social rent in particular as secured by your Section 106. But given our social purpose and the flexibilities that we have as a housing association, our approach as set out has been to reduce the amount of private housing, to increase the provision of affordable housing tenures within the FDS by relocating some of the social rent previously on Plot 18 and bringing forward some of the shared ownership from future phases 2 and beyond. So the result is an accelerated delivery of affordable housing supply in the early phases of regeneration, which, as the officer said, we hope will facilitate decanting. And so overall our housing provision will increase from 51% to 60%, and in practical terms what that means is 36 additional habitable rooms for social rent and 252 habitable rooms within the intermediate 10 years. As the report says, the independent assessment of the proposal requested by the Mayor of London confirms that the 2 phases deliver over and above what would normally be considered a reasonable amount of affordable housing. But when we talk to residents, and we've been on the estate now for nearly 5 years, the overwhelming message we hear is that we should get on with the job. The meeting tonight falls at a time when the sentiment on the A3 is changing, and after long delays, residents believe that change is coming. Demolition is well advanced. We have started work already with residents to refine our approach to the practical housing and neighbourhood management approach for the initial homes, and we are working now to identify and appoint building contractors to commence the building of those homes. Now, due to the scale, we will deliver FDS in 3 sub-phases, and currently we're procuring the contract for what we call Package A, which is to the west of the site, next to Westmoreland Road.
30 seconds.
That comprises 229 homes, of which 84% will be for social rent, including the extra care, those with learning disabilities and the community facility. And in parallel, we hope to start Plot 18 with its wealth of community facilities, which we share the Council's view that it's that piece which underpins the social regeneration as well as the physical regeneration. And that we hope, in that context, that after due deliberation, you will grant consent for these minor amendments, and on this basis we can commence the long-awaited construction early next year.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there questions? Any questions? Councillor Hatch.
So, same which I asked to the officers earlier, can you reassure us that we don't need to escape routes in case of a fire?
Actually, we have made a number of internal changes which aren't covered by planning for exactly the reasons that will have motivated that question. A deep concern following Grenfell, at which we have housing in that area, and some of our tenants were personally committed, and it's had a profound effect on Notting Hill Genesis. So just to clarify, forgive me, just on my prompt sheet. So we have increased the sprinklers in the building so that all blocks over 4 stories now have sprinklers. That's over and above building regulations. And again, we've gone over and above current building regulations in requiring that all materials used are non-combustible. The predominant material is brick, which you'll appreciate is non-combustible. And furthermore, again, although whilst not a planning matter, we insist that we have followed, and we insist that our contractor will use the local authority's building control department to. I hope you will take confidence that your own officers are providing that scrutiny for the detailed design and then the build out.
Thank you.
Further questions? Okay, I'll take Councillor McCullough first of all.
I just want to ask actually the same question I asked earlier, but really to get your take on it, which is about the intermediate tenure mix and the larger unit sizes within that. I mean, obviously a scheme which is delivering near to 1,000 homes, or in this kind of calculation, near to 1,000 homes. It surprises me that there aren't literally 1% of households that would be keen to benefit from a 3 or 4 bed intermediate shared ownership property. I myself live in the shared ownership building, and I know of families who are struggling to find out what to do next because they can't afford to buy up to market level purchase, but equally are outgrowing a 2 bed properties. I'd just like to hear your take on it as a housing association.
I mean, it was the practical point is that in this area that the mayor has a threshold which recommends that you don't bring forward shared ownership for values that are over £600,000 because you can't deliver them within the affordability criteria. So I'm afraid it's as basic as that. I mean, we do happen to find them hard to sell elsewhere. Here, that they're above and beyond what's deemed to be affordable by the mayor. And we hope to balance that by retaining families. I mean, it's an area with an amazing school, it's got fantastic facilities. The whole vision is to have it for families. As was mentioned, we're increasing the 3-bed and the plus in the other 10 years. This is just one of those areas where, frankly, shared ownership is sort of planning matter, but probably needs to evolve, and I'm afraid as a sector we haven't quite got it right yet.
Councillor Morris?
Yes, so following on from that, and again related to my earlier question, so obviously you've got four-bedroom townhouses that are for private sale.
Yeah.
So you just said about how much the flats are going to be, and that for the shared ownership they'd be very expensive. I presume that these would be, and you know, are we confident that we have families in the area who are going to be taking those properties rather than somebody who's going to buy to let and just put them into just put individuals in there? I know it's not something you can stipulate as such, but you know, have we got the need? Have we got an established need that for those family homes in the private sector? I guess is my question.
I mean,
even the income. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, those houses will be extremely expensive, and we do know that the early phases that L&Q did have struggled to sell them. I mean, I think we aspire to be having families for the reasons that you would be there. We can't control who we sell the houses to. What we can do our darned is to try and secure that it's a kind of place that people want to come and live in. And we think, you know, the quality test that, you know, we expect to be held to account for across all tenures will help that. I mean, the local authority is making Southwark a fantastic place to live. There's New Elephant Park just across the road. Burgess Park has had a huge amount of investment. So I don't think we can force it. I think we will play our part in making it a really attractive you know, proposition.
Councillor Whittam?
As you know, Councillor Soames and I are quite concerned about the removal of play space, including outside space like the balconies and the roof terraces. Can you comment on that?
I mean, I'll ask Sarah to help me on this as well, but I think the first point to be clear on is that the removals where it has been is because of the TfL quiet ways around the FDS. Again, it's one of those balances of public goods that you'll wrestle with all the time. I mean, I happen to be a cyclist and I cycle along that route, and it is incredible how many people now cycle on that route. So I think that's the first bit. I think the other element is that it's the child yield that's increased, again, rather than taking away space. So I'm afraid it's not a perfect solution, so we haven't reduced it, we just haven't been able to increase it quite as much. We did have an over provision within FDS for one age group, and we're very happy to make the financial contribution according to section 106, which will help. I think the other point I want to make, without it, it's not within my gift to control it yet, but again, one of the elements of package A, so that first tender, which I'm working up to be able to let now, includes the community facility. It's a community facility which we build and pass to the council at a peppercorn rent, so collectively we need to work through how that's going to be managed, and we stand ready to help if we can. But you know, quite what that's going to be used for, you know, the extent to which there's an opportunity for youth provision. You know, we know there's some fantastic facility to Inspire on phase 2. You know, that won't be there forever. What's the future for that? We've also, since the planning applications were first put in, you know, Creation Trust who are the successor body to the NDC. I'm sure many of you will have worked with them, a very locally based organisation. They've taken over the Giraffe House, and you know, the youth facilities that they are providing from there are really quite fantastic, and we continue to play our part, funding them through the council. So again, not a perfect answer. We're trying to bring things forward in a balance, using a mixture of the land we have available, the money we have, and the support we can offer, not just about facilities but about services, activities, etc.
If I may just add, you're quite right in terms of the uplift, and as Ellen has mentioned, in terms of child yield calculation, that has increased. But what I'd reiterate, and the impact of the Quiet Way is important here, is that the original scheme, based on consideration of that uplift in child yield, over-provided on 5 to 11 floor space in terms of play area previously. But owing to Quiet Way coming forward, there is a required reduction to facilitate those works, which then results in a slight reduction of 99 square metres of 5 to 11 floor space. So from that point of view, the reduction is a consequence of those works, albeit the original permission sought to over-provide on that. So I think in terms of the contribution, that's a mitigating factor which we have worked with the authority to provide in terms of mitigation to that, but certainly it's just emphasising that the Quiet Way does have an implication on what Notting Hill Genesis can provide in this location. Just wanted to corroborate that.
Thank you. Just turn your mic. This is a follow-up on this point, is it? Yeah. Fair enough.
Looking at page 24 on the members' pack.
If you could direct your questions to the applicant.
Yeah, I'm just asking them to put it up. 24.
Okay.
There's 2 balconies to the middle section, which are going to be removed, for example. That's outside space for those flats that is going to be removed. If you look at now, page 25, go the other way, go the other way. That's the new scheme. So those 2 balconies have gone. Am I not right? Page 24 and 25. So the 2 balconies in the middle have gone.
I've got the architect here who can shed some light on that particular detail if you would find that of use. Yeah. Chair, is that acceptable?
Absolutely. Please introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I am Luke Davis, project architect for the FDS. All the units do still provide all the required London plan and Aylesbury AAP balcony sizes. It might be a I must admit, I can't quite remember on this because this is quite a long time ago, but I think that balcony is either now facing into the courtyard, or it might just be our viewers chopping off the things in the background. But definitely, if you look at the actual plans for that floor, you will find that that unit does have a compliant size balcony. It's possibly just a quirk of the view, but I guarantee that there is a properly sized balcony for the size of unit that is there. Okay. Yeah.
And the roof terraces that have been removed? Page paragraph 63 of the report.
Those units are they weren't accessible areas. They're secondary amenity in terms of sort of visual, you could see into them, but they didn't actually provide an active area. So by virtue of that, their removal isn't considered to be impactful in terms of access to communal areas.
Yeah, so it was a green roof that we. Oh, sorry. It was a green roof that we looked onto rather than actually something you could go outside and use.
Again, just to make sure I've understood your response, in other words, what we're seeing here is not a correct representation of that building.
Like I say, I cannot remember the exact floor plate of that building, having submitted it many months ago. I cannot remember if it is exactly, if it's on the courtyard side, or if it is on the, or if it has just moved further back, so therefore it's behind the kind of cut plane of that view.
but it still is there. And if and like I say, I am speculating here, but if it was one, we may well have moved it because it would have been oversailing the other building, which would have been a bit of a wouldn't have been a very normal thing. I guarantee everything has the correct community standards. Every balcony, and if it has moved around, it would be a better aspect for the balconies that
Sorry, can I just add? In all cases where balconies have been removed or reduced, in all cases where balconies have been reduced in size or removed, they were secondary balconies. They weren't the principal balconies. It's not the case that a unit would be left with no private amenity space. It's where they might have had two. One's been reduced in size and so on. So this unit that referred to, there is a balcony at the other side looking into the courtyard.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, I've got Councillor Lauder first, and if I can encourage members now to give your questions focus on material planning considerations, please.
Hello. I wonder if you could tell me how many disabled units you will be building within the development.
So in relation to the FDS, 12% of the units proposed will be delivered as wheelchair accessible units, and in consideration of the applications before us in plot 18, as the case officers previously mentioned, 9.8% of units are proposed as wheelchair accessible.
My second question is, for the 55 years and over, how many units will you be building for them?
Are those the social rented units on plot 18? It's unchanged from the previous application, which is, I think, 17.
Pleasure. Councillor Morris, did you have a question? Yes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. Can I just clarify, have we lost a green roof? And if we have lost a green roof, it's not being replaced? Is it just been moved rather than lost completely?
Yes, the additional floor has gone in and the roof has gone up a story. Actually, I presume it was a green roof. I cannot exactly remember that. It should have been a green roof, I think. Yes.
Can I clarify? So in paragraph 73 of our report, it says the proposed amendments to subplot 5 include the following: removal of green roof from blocks 5C and update to show roof plant equipment. So that suggests that we're losing a green roof and we're getting plant up there instead.
We are losing a green roof for plant, but it is a very small green roof and it doesn't have access to it. It's not...
in terms of sustainability and biodiversity rather than necessarily a terrace to play on.
There is a condition on the original consent, which is going to be on this consent as well, around green roofs, and we can ask for or have the green roof be provided perhaps on another section. But the green roof that's been removed is very small. It's not a substantial space.
No? Okay. Councillor Firms?
I've just got a question and a comment. My comment refers back to the child space. I don't think any over provision should be sneered at, and I would have thought that would have been, something that we could aspire to. But an under provision, I would still maintain is undesirable. But I heard your response. What's the difference between and why the change in the mono pitch roof and the parapet roofs? Can you just talk us through that, please? And I'm referring to paragraph 71 on page 123.
That I believe we're talking about is subplot 2, is it? That was generally done for buildability reasons and also long-term maintenance reasons. Previously, we had parapet roofs with sort of, well, the word escapes me, sort of bird wings, so sort of draining to the centre and then draining out. And instead, we changed it. This one's social vent houses, so instead they just drain to the back. Therefore, there's less likelihood of future, future water pooling on the roofs and future leaking through roofs.
Further questions, members? Are we now content? Moment. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Can I ask, are there supporters who live within 100 metres of the development in the room? If not, I will move therefore to last but not least, of course, the ward councillors. Would I like to come forward? If we now ask yourself to introduce yourself to the committee, then you have 3 minutes to make your presentation. Thank you.
I'm Councillor Paul Fleming. I'm a ward councillor for Faraday.
Councillor Jack Buck, also ward councillor for Faraday Ward.
You may begin.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to speak on behalf of myself and Councillor Buck, and then he'll give a further summary. We have no issue as ward councillors with the minor amendments that have been presented. We do have comments on the change in tenure mix, but are ultimately overall supportive of the applications. I should declare to the committee, not that it is a pecuniary interest, but I live at 163 Merrow Street, which is within 250 metres of the development. The amount of affordable housing of all types increases on the development site, and consequently increases as a percentage of housing on the sites. However, the increase in the number of shared ownership is larger than the increase in social rented. Social rented homes are the main need in our community, and we are determined that the overall development represents 75% of the affordable housing being at social rent. However, we have been convinced that the overall increase in volume of housing is a positive development, and anticipating that the shared ownership properties will mostly be taken by resident leaseholders on the estate, which is another key objective, we've been reassured and so are cautiously supportive of the proposed changes. To be clear, our support is caveated by the reassurances that the overall delivery of affordable housing across the regeneration will be at 75% social rented at least. To that end, we would welcome further questions from the committee as follows: to us and the developer, to restate and reassure the committee that the overall percentage tenure mix will be 75% social rented across the regeneration, to urge them to make clear commitments about how the over 50s accommodation will be kept so in perpetuity, and to us the importance about the right to remain on the estate to our community, the importance of additional homes for current local authority leaseholders on the estate, and we're happy to answer questions about child play space in the ward as well.
Just very briefly to add to Councillor Fleming's comments, I just want to say we're here as local board councillors to speak cautiously in favour of the application. Specifically, we're very keen to see Notting Hill come forward with further shared ownership housing, which is designed to assist the right to remain for resident leaseholders on the estate, which is a key plank of the regeneration and a specific commitment of ours. And we're happy to take questions on any other issues if you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm impressed. That was, of course, 2 minutes, but it's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'll now proceed to questions. Councillor McCunn, first of all, and then Councillor McCash afterwards.
Thanks, Chair. You've obviously heard me ask already about the larger shared ownership properties, and I obviously heard the answer from the applicant about the kind of limitations on the overall value of those properties. But actually, now you've mentioned former resident leaseholders of the Aylesbury estate. Actually, that to me may change things slightly, because I would have assumed, and I'm just seeking some clarification, that I presume there were some quite large family units that were or had been or are in the process of being lost through the regeneration on the Aylesbury that would have been leasehold. Is that my assumption? Are they correct?
Yes, that is true. However, typical of all estates of its type, most of those which were large units have, as Councillor Morris has spoken about, already been broken up and purchased. The sort of rash of right to buy was some time ago, and as a consequence, people don't tend to be resident leaseholders in properties of that size. Across the whole of the Aylesbury as it stands, there is an over-provision of 1- and 2-bedroomed houses, and that is as true of leasehold properties as it is of others. And we also have a large number of people who are leaseholders who wish to downsize but want to stay in the community. And indeed the over 50s development is a key plank of that, with that mix of tenure. Although actually that is, if I'm correct, slightly in favour of social rented units. So actually, I think overall the provision of private sale large homes like that, if it is the price that we pay in order to develop, in order to pay for more social rented housing, I think it is definitely a price worth paying. And I would say, we have a number of very good schools. We have a number of which are including a school of which I'm a governor on East Street, has an under provision on the school roll, but yet they are performing well. It is an appealing and attractive place for families of all tenure types to move. So I think the questions are valid, but I don't find them particularly concerning.
Chair, if I may as well, just to follow up as well, Councillor McCallum, I think a specific concern of resident leaseholders on the estate at the moment, and what is going to affect their right to remain, is their ability to carry enough equity into the shared ownership homes to actually have access to them as well. And so having seen that increase in provision in 1 and 2 bed shared ownership will make that more realistic for a lot of them, which is what I believe the reason for the applicant bringing them forward earlier on, so that more people can afford them.
Thank you. Councillor Mahash.
Thank you very much for your very clear and concise input. So I'm going to follow up on one of the questions that you asked us to ask you about, which is about the guarantee of the 75% affordable, social rent across the whole development, and what you think, and what impact you think that commitment has on our decision today.
So we had brief conversations with the department about this at the pre-planning committee. As we understand it, it is a part of the Section 106 agreement that at every application stage in the regeneration, the tenure mix is reviewed. So we've been given assurances from the planning committee, although we would welcome those to be said again today for the record, that the applicant will come forward with a review in the later stage to guarantee that the area action plan policy of 75% of affordable housing is socially rented is guaranteed. That's certainly what we've been told, and it would be good to have that on the record. Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Stone.
Running theme, reduction in child space. Paul and Jack, I mean, you've heard my comments this evening. What's your view? Thank you.
I have to say I'm relatively relaxed about it because of the proximity of both sides to Burgess Park and other parks. Well, the one slight caveat I would put on it that I think would be worthwhile the committee considering, because the way I read the papers is that the 100-odd grand compensation is to be allocated to Burgess Park specifically. We have a lot of parks in the ward. There are Faraday Gardens, with the new pocket parks there. There are also the what's called Moogers that are in place and will be put in there. There is indeed play space that should be publicly accessible at the back of Michael Faraday School. So actually, whether one restricts it to a broader area, almost all of Burgess Park is in Faraday Ward. You would only have to say within Faraday Ward in order to include all of that as a possibility. But I think the fact that the ward is so small, and the fact that a number of some well-used and some underused parks are within very easy and safe walking distance of these sites, means that I'm speaking for both of us, I'm relatively relaxed about it.
No, I just share Councillor Fleming's comments.
Are there further questions? Sorry. Are there further questions from members? Very good, very good. Thank you very much for your presentation. We've had presentations. Are there further questions for officers based on the evidence you've heard so far? Councillor Chair.
Thank you. To the councillor's comment on the 75% and it being kept in perpetuity, can you confirm that on the record?
Yeah, it's guaranteed as part of the Section 106 agreement. At each, there's milestones built into the legal agreement whereby the housing that's been delivered will be reviewed, and it gives an opportunity for the next stage to make amendments to the tenure. So if we have to up the social rented to get to 75, we can do that. If there's an over provision and so on, it can be amended. But yes, the 75% is guaranteed under the Section 106.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could just pick up that last point from Councillor Fleming about the about where the Section 106 gets spent. I wonder if you could clarify what we can and can't do in relation to that.
We have it in the report as Burgess Park, but I don't think the developer nor the council would object to it being changed to Faraday Ward.
Okay, that's good. We make note of that. Councillor Whittam.
Just looking at paragraph 100, have we got a sequencing agreement secured by a condition so that plot 18 isn't finished before FDS is started?
It's covered by the Section 106 agreement. It's covered by the rolling programme that's in, I think it's Schedule 8. So it doesn't need to be added. Since we wrote the report, we have reviewed the Section 106 agreement and it is already covered in it.
Thank you. Are there further questions? Very good. Very good. In that case, I think we're in a position now to look at the original motion. And this first will take note of what amendments we want to make. I'll take the most recent one, which I think was an interesting. Can I just ask you just to repeat it to make sure we've got it right, that the Section 106 agreement funding should read Faraday Ward as opposed to simply, right, Faraday Ward as opposed to Burgess Park.
Yes, the 107,000, yeah, 107,814 pounds, the financial contribution.
Okay, that's duly noted, unless I'm told otherwise. That's fine.
Faraday Ward should benefit from that as opposed to specifically
Burgess Park. Indeed. And that's fine, duly noted. Whether, I don't believe there are other amendments, I don't believe. Am I right? No? Do we concur? Yeah. Otherwise I'm going to move to the vote. We're in agreement? Fair enough in that case then. So there is debating for a moment. I'm going to proceed. I'm conscious of time. Colleagues, settle down, settle down, settle down. So in that case, what I've got to do, if I may, take note of the recommendation set out in the report, plus the amendment as just agreed. Do we need to just take a vote on the amendment first? Well, I think we've got a consensus on the amendment. I'm not going to go to a vote on that. That's fair enough. I'm going to propose the motion plus the amendment. I will propose it. Can I have the seconder, please? Very good. Can I now go to votes to approve? Unanimous. Yep. Oh, for 7.1, 7.2. You're voting
on both.
Yes, we're voting. Yes. So we agreed. Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you all for that. Thank you. Well, we have a 5-minute break, if I may. A 5-minute break.
If you don't know,